Hello and welcome to this lesson for Advanced Higher Biology, which is looking at parental investment. So what you're expected to know is essentially the definition of parental investment, comparing the production of sperm and eggs in relation to the number and the energy story, comparing female investment in mammals and in non-mammals, explaining the classification of organisms as R strategists or K strategists and the characteristics of each, and comparing the costs and benefits of external versus internal fertilization. So in an organism, reproduction takes some additional energy. So it would appear that the organisms who are best suited to capture the energy in the environment are the most likely to leave larger numbers of descendants. Sexual reproduction begins with the fertilization of a female gamete by a male gamete. However, there's a finite level of energy available to produce some of these gametes, particularly the egg. The more eggs you make, the less energy can be put into each one, and vice versa. So an organism such as an osprey will lay only 1 or 2 eggs in a season, and these tend to be larger eggs with a high level of a food store in each one. However, if you consider a fish like a salmon, they can lay thousands of eggs in one season, but they're proportionally quite small and have got less of an internal energy source. So, however, in comparison to the egg, the investment levels in a sperm have really been tailored to produce the greatest number possible, and with the ability to reach the egg. Once the sperm has reached the egg or hasn't reached the egg, its job is finished, so they require less of an energy store. They require a small amount of energy in order just to reach the egg, and therefore we're able to produce more sperm as a species than eggs, usually because sperm require far less energy to be produced. So in most animals and in almost all mammals, females provide far more parental investment than just the egg. There's usually internal fertilization, which helps protect the developing embryo. This usually has quite a prolonged period of gestation, so a longer pregnancy period. During that period, the female is also required to develop a placenta to help support the developing embryo. Once the baby has been born, there is usually a period of lactation where the female will be required to produce milk in order to help the offspring survive. So this parental investment is quite costly for the female, but it does increase the probability that young will survive. The level of parental care normally depends on the number of offspring and on the environment. That allows us to categorise organisms into either R strategists or K strategists, and that's based on the level of parental investments in the offspring and in the number produced. The RK selection theory relates to the selection of combinations of traits in an organism, essentially a trade-off between the quantity and quality of the offspring. The focus is either on an increased quantity of offspring at the expense of individual parents being invested, or a reduced quantity of offspring with a corresponding increased parental investment. And that tends to vary quite wildly and provides different successes in different environments depending on where you are. The characteristics of these type of strategists depend on the individuals themselves. So generally speaking, R selected species tend to be smaller, have a shorter amount of time between generations. They tend to mature quite rapidly and reproduce earlier in their lifetime, often reproducing only once. They produce a larger number of smaller offspring, each of which receives only a smaller energy input. They've got limited parental care, and the majority of the offspring will not in fact reach adulthood. On the other hand, our K-selected species tend to be larger and live longer. They mature more slowly and can reproduce many times in their lifestyle. They produce relatively few and larger offspring, have a higher level of parental care, and consequently many offspring have a high probability of surviving to adulthood. In terms of the environment, we tend to see R selection occurring in unstable environments where the species has not reached its reproductive capacity. In other words, the species can produce more offspring that the environment can support. And K selection tends to occur in stable environments. Now, fertilization itself usually requires the movement of the male gamete. Male gametes are usually quite small, quite fragile, and prone to dehydration. They usually require a liquid medium in which to swim. In most fish, will produce a large number of sex cells which are released into water outside of the female's body. But it's the courtship ritual that makes sure male and female sex cells are released near each other at the same time. Land mammals, on the other hand, don't live in a watery medium into which you can release sperm and eggs, so instead we need a fluid containing sperm to be produced by the male and deposited inside the female's body during intercourse. The benefits of external fertilization is that you can have very large numbers of offspring produced. The main costs, though, are that it's a bit risky, not many gametes are necessarily fertilised, there's limited or no parental care, and few offspring are going to survive. As far as internal fertilisation goes, the primary benefit is the increased chance of successful fertilisation. So you need fewer eggs and therefore less energy investment by the female. The offspring can be retained internally for protection and or for the development of the organism, and therefore there's a higher offspring survival rate. The main cost to internal fertilisation is that a mate must be located, and that requires energy expenditure, and we need to a direct transfer of gametes from one parent to the other. So from that, you should be able to state that by parental investment, we mean the amount of energy given from the parent to the offspring. That in terms of production of sperm and eggs in relation to the number and the energy store, we tend to produce fewer eggs that are larger and have a greater energy store, and you can produce more sperm which are smaller and have far less energy stores required. The female investment in mammals tends to be fairly significant compared to non-mammals. That R strategists and K strategists vary depending on the specific organisms. They follow along a scale, however, each have specific characteristics. And the external and internal fertilisation both have specific costs and benefits.